Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Niladri Chaudhary, President of Green Computing Foundation. And as you all know, that Green Computing Foundation has very recently published their Sustainable IT Insight report based on the survey that was conducted recently. And today we have with us a very experienced consultant on the area of sustainable IT, Fiona, with us from Switzerland. And I will request Fiona to introduce herself.
Sure. Thank you, first of all, for having me. I'm really excited to see the results of the survey. So congratulations on getting that out. My name is Fiona Leibundgut, and I started Sparkit Consulting just over a year ago to bring sustainable IT strategy closer to organizations. I am based out of Zurich, Switzerland, but I work with a global network. That's how we got connected.
Thank you, Fiona. So let us get into the questions. So you know that one of the things that we saw in our report is that the boards and CXOs are not still got into the scenario where they have a good awareness about sustainable IT. So in your experience, do you see the board or CXOs having awareness of IT, having significant negative contribution to the environment, and they need to focus on it?
So honestly, I'm not surprised that the awareness is very low at the board and CXO level. I work very much with companies that create products rather than services. So the IT percentage of the footprint is extremely low compared to the actual physical products produced. So I don't even expect that the board or the CXO would have such a deep awareness of the impact of technology. I do, however, think it is important for them to understand, because a lot of boards and CXOs are looking towards the big tech trends to sort of save, revenue, planet, the people, everything, things like AI and blockchain. So I do think there is an acute need for these people to at least understand that there is an environmental impact on the negative side and not just on the positive side.
Okay, thanks. And that's where I think we all come together to create those awareness programs, starting from the board and all the way down.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the next question is, in your consulting engagements, do you see sustainable IT related roles in senior management, middle management, and up to project level? Because we see chief sustainability officer, we see sustainability manager. But do you see it in the IT part of things?
There's definitely a trend that it's increasing, particularly in large organizations. I see that there are people whose full responsibility, their entire job is IT sustainability. In smaller, medium-sized companies, what I see more typically is that the head of IT strategy or maybe even the CIO, but there is a part of their role that is allocated to the topic. And then in extremely small companies, I think, forget it. They don't have the resources, they don't have the time, they have other things to work on. So maybe more on a hobby level.
So have you seen, even at the project level, somebody is responsible on sustainable IT in an IT project?
Not for projects yet. There may be in companies that I haven't worked with, so that I don't know for sure yet, but I assume you mean in an example, let's say there's a big ERP transformation, that in that project organization, there is a sustainability component that I haven't seen yet. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but I haven't seen it myself.
I mean, from our respondents also, we did not see the mention that they have. Yeah. Okay, so the next one is on, have you come across sustainable IT related KPIs being tracked and reported to the senior management level?
Not at all. I think it's the companies I work with are maybe too early in their journey for that. Where you might see a metric is if they have a lot of on-premise data centers and they're looking at the energy consumption or the energy mix, but it's not driven out of a need for sustainability. That's obviously more related to cost and efficiency than necessarily sustainability. I do think there's a lot of potential to grow into this space of sustainable IT dashboards, putting the data in the hands of the people that need them, the people who make the decisions, whether it's on a project or in the operations or sourcing. I think there is a lot of potential to improve the data level, and I'd like to see it. I just haven't seen it yet.
Right. And it's important because if you look at the KPIs, if it is taken up to the higher level as a OKR or KPIs, and you use it, that helps you in your performance improvement, because it's not about reporting, it is also about improvement, right?
What I have seen is benchmarks where companies take a snapshot of what is their footprint, and that's sort of a static point in time. And then over time, you can measure again and see how it's changed. I haven't seen it so much in operational metrics.
Okay, great. So till now, we are fine with how our report has come out and what your experience shows, right? So the next important aspect, what we see, is about funds. So do you see funds getting allocated to sustainable IT related initiatives? And what do you think is the challenge if the fund is not really that available for sustainable IT initiatives?
I do see funds being allocated, otherwise I wouldn't have a job or a company, of course. But I think what I'm seeing, it's very tentative. It starts small. It starts with awareness. It starts with, do we have a problem? Do we need to be doing something? Where should we be doing something? So the first trigger is always the question, we don't know anything. Should we know something? And so that's the first area. And then it's like, okay, we see there's a problem. What is our problem? How do we size the problem? And so the way that money is allocated is really incrementally, because there's just a bit of a black box. Not enough people understand why there is a need to invest in it.
Absolutely correct. I mean, we got the same feedback. And what we also see is that people are a little bit also concerned about spending on sustainable IT rather than spending on IT's other areas, because they feel those are the areas which is required for the daily run of the business, whereas they are still not aware as to how sustainable IT would help them in improving their normal business running.
And the challenge that IT has is it's almost always a cost center. So there's a lot of pressure to reduce costs. And so what you're saying there is exactly it. There needs to be a return on investment. And that's not directly clear to everyone from the start. I think that might be one of the bigger blockers of why there isn't more investment in the subject.
Absolutely. And today there is another competitor for requesting the budget is AI. And everybody is putting money on AI.
Yeah.
Great. So among your customers, have you seen like green procurement of IT related products and services, having KPIs to track sustainable IT procurement, and sustainable IT vendor performance evaluation, or even vendor selection?
Not in as much as how we would like to see it. I do see that procurement and sourcing outside of IT already have a pretty strong role in sustainability because so much of emissions come from the value chain in scope 3. The same is true for IT, of course. There's a lot, especially in our sort of as a service driven world. The vendors are hugely important, and the relationship with them is important. What I've seen, especially out of these benchmarks, is one of the recommendations priorities is improve the dialogue with your vendors and understand the KPIs that you're measuring for sustainability there as well. The truth is that none of my clients are really at that point yet where it's embedded, it's live, it's, you know, we're actively working with sourcing KPIs, unless they're sort of more adopted from group sourcing and procurement.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, in our survey, what we found is that not many having sustainability being the KPIs as part of the evaluation for selecting a vendor or part of the evaluation in terms of performance evaluation of the vendors. I mean, selection of the vendors is still going with that L1, L2, L3 kind of a scenario. So sustainability doesn't play a more significant role or doesn't have a higher weightage. Most of them doesn't even look at it.
And it's actually also an interesting point. In the world today, I don't think that sustainability will really change sourcing decisions in IT or not in IT. From what I've seen in businesses that have existed for more than 20 years, sort of this more established organization, that the choice for sustainability, it's never really just because of that. Companies will still go on performance, on cost, on everything else, and then sustainability is like a extra nice to have, but it's never going to sway the decision from what I've seen so far.
Absolutely. Great. So what do you see is the current practices relating to sustainable IT in the entire SDLC, software development lifecycle? Are the organizations using tools to capture sustainable IT related data?
In the SDLC, not specifically. I've seen more guidelines, handbooks, ideas of how to, develop more energy efficient code. But what I've heard in sort of more unofficial feedback is that it doesn't feel worth the effort. Sort of the efficiency balance versus effort balance doesn't quite feel right. So it's more awareness, nice to have, embedded maybe in a hackathon, but I haven't seen companies put too much pressure on the way that the SDLC is managed.
Right.
Is that what you saw in the survey as well?
We saw the same.
Yeah.
It's absolutely not there in the life cycle. Max to max, what we see is people looking at the hardware side, the infrastructure side, because it's also easy to collect or capture the data rather than going through the entire life cycle. Number one. Number two is they're not looking at actually changing the design and architecture to make it sustainable, which in turn actually will give more benefit, but that's not there. The third is, I think the other aspect is people are looking for tools which will help them to do that, but there is no one single tool by the click of a button, get a kind of a dashboard for them to look at. So that's not there either.
But also, if you look at impact areas of IT, software tends to be on the lower end. If you focus more on the hosting, where it can be a really great channel is you have developers not just in IT, you have developers across the organization, and that's a good way to build awareness around green IT, not just in the IT organization, but beyond. And it's a way to democratize the topic in a way that hosting will not, or hardware will not.
And that's where the awareness level is important to bring it up as much as possible.
Yeah.
Right. Important area that we are looking at is data also, data management. And now that with AI coming in, data is becoming more and more important. So is there thoughts related to sustainable IT in the area of data management? How is sustainable IT being practiced in this area?
And with data management, I just wanted to check with you, you mean how it's the whole life cycle? So they seek the CRUD life cycle, create, etc.
So what we looked at is a couple of things. One is obviously the data storage, because nowadays data storage is online. It's not offline. So how is the storage? Is it designed? Is it architected? Is it implemented in such a manner that the data is crisp? It is not a lot. Duplication of data across multiple systems, leading to a lot of data processing for any small thing that we want. And wherever we are trying to go, we are looking at picking up or processing a lot of data rather than having smaller pieces of elements, which can be looked at independently. So that is not there, is what we saw.
So there's quite a lot of topics in there. It's very broad, and we could probably spend a whole hour just on data management. But I guess there's a couple of things that you called out. It's what data do we have? Do we need all of the data that we have? Are we over collecting? That's definitely an area where sustainability means, only collect what you need. It's the same for data privacy regulations around the world, only collect what you need. So it kind of goes hand in hand there. The storage you mentioned as well, that's obviously quite tightly linked to energy consumption and hardware use. So there's a sustainability component there. I don't know if I'm seeing that much specifically in terms of strategy and organization for data management specifically. But I think there are a lot of different areas of data management we could dive into and uncover the sustainability angle for each of them.
What we also saw is that a lot of sustainable IT related practices that people are saying they are doing related to data is more like backup and all, which are your regular standard practices, not sustainable IT related practices per se, but it is definitely helping in the sustainability.
There's many IT practices that happen today for efficiency or like lean IT reasons, which also have a positive impact on sustainability, but they're not done for that reason. So I think that's why KPIs and measurement are quite important as well, to help create that story of what are we already doing by coincidence and what more could we be doing with intention.
Absolutely. And that's where if you look at, instead of our traditional relational database management system, we are looking at more microservice kind of thing where each microservice is supposed to have its own database. If we are having a distributed database, then it is much more sustainable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So the other point, which now we are going towards the end, is what is the state of e-waste management in the digital world, individually and as well as an organization that you see?
So for me, this is a very tough topic to tackle because it feels like a lot of I don't have much power over it as an individual or with my clients. As companies, what happens to the devices afterwards, it feels very difficult to control. So you work with your local disposal organizations, whether it's a recycling hub or a company that buys and sells them on. It feels like there isn't much power. Maybe there should be more power for companies and people trying to dispose of electronic devices in a more ethical way. I only know the information for Europe and the EU directive, the WEEE, the waste of electrical and electronic equipment. A lot of the data shows that e-waste is illegally exported and typically ends up in landfills. And that's definitely something we want to counteract, but it's very difficult to say how can we do it. So where I try to empower myself and my companies, my clients, is the more we can use what we already have, the more we reduce consumption and creation of new devices, the less impact there will be at the end of the life cycle. So more focus on how are we reusing, fixing, using all kinds of levers to extend the life cycle. And then how are we getting data on what happens to the devices when we dispose of them, to get a little bit of transparency into what is happening at the end of the life cycle. Because I find it extremely frustrating. It feels a little bit powerless. There must be something. So if you know if there's something that I could be doing or we could be doing more on e-waste, let me know. But that's for me sort of the scariest part of the life cycle.
Absolutely. Like what we saw is in the bigger companies, the e-waste is still handled better because they also go with more certified ITAD vendors, IT asset disposition vendors. So they do a better job of things. And recycling, as you rightly said, is not the only option. Only 17 to 20% of the e-waste is even collected for e-waste.
Yeah.
And only 2 to 3% is processed. We actually visited one of the recycling plants in Bangalore. And when we were discussing there, they were saying that their biggest problem is collection. So
Interesting.
even getting the e-waste is difficult. Big companies with big organizations, fine. But the moment you get into the tier 2, tier 3 organizations, it's not there. And that creates a problem because even if they have to process it, the processing needs a certain amount of materials to process for every run of the machine. And the machines for extracting the valuable items, valuable metals becomes much more costlier. So what happens is they are not able to take it. And then it goes into the either landfill or it actually goes, and then there are local people, even kids, who will burn those boards and all, and they will try to extract the gold or silver out of it, which is not only bad on the toxic air part of it, but it is also bad for those who are doing that.
Yeah.
So, and those are, a lot of them are kids kind of. So that creates a problem, is what we see. The second challenge that we saw from the discussion with the vendor is, as an individual, we are also at fault. Problem is, we don't want to give away our equipments. And
Emotional attachment.
yeah, and we see a lot of those still lying in our drawers, still lying. But when you ask them to dispose it, one is emotional attachment. The other is they feel that they are going to get a good amount of money back out of it, which also doesn't happen. The third point is e-waste, I think, ties well with the circularity. If we increase the usage of it, obviously, less numbers will be going out for e-waste. So that is again another thing that needs to be looked at. But in the survey, what we saw is e-waste is not good for smaller organizations, but better for bigger organizations. Yeah.
Interesting.
One of the reasons is because a lot of the places, these specific countries or the place where you are, there are pollution control board or similar bodies. So they have a lot of rules for e-waste and companies have to follow that. So it's a little bit more better than the other things.
Yeah, I think we see the same thing in Switzerland. I read a report earlier this year that most of the e-waste is in our houses rather than where it should be. And more unofficially, from conversations with recycling centers in Switzerland, I've understood that the two bigger challenges that they have is textiles and e-waste, in terms of there's a lot of it, and the way it's disposed of, it's not, there's no good way really for them to be disposing of it. So yeah, if we find solutions for e-waste, then I'm really happy.
Sure, and that's where we are trying to work with some e-waste vendors and trying to see how to utilize it, because as I said, recycling is not the option. So if they can refurbish, if they can repair, and if we can use that for CSR activities of giving to NGOs and all, who can give it to the kids or something in the rural areas for them to be able to study, or for younger people to use it for making some earning out of some activity which they can do only with the laptop or whatever, it would be helpful.
Yeah.
So we are trying to see how to work. But as I said, the collection is the biggest challenge, as everybody says. It's too spread and people are not willing to give it out.
Yeah.
See,
if you spend a lot of money on a laptop to just throw it away after a few years, it feels unbalanced.
Yes. And that's where one thing comes to my mind is, again, the procurement policies or the policies of the organizations. For example, most of us who are working in a company, we do not use our company laptop for a lot of personal use. So those policies are stopping us from using one laptop and forcing us to have two laptops at least. But if you start getting into the policy of bring your own device, have necessary precautions and setups being done to make it secure and use it, I think that would be one good step to in the milestone.
Also in the purchasing contract, making sure that you're purchasing devices with a high repairability score.
Yes.
And I know there's companies that do it more for the individual markets where you have things like Fairphone where it's easy to take apart. But at a commercial level for company sizes, I don't think we're there yet.
No, some of the companies are coming out with laptops where or even servers and all, where they are getting into the contract, where they are saying that after a certain period of time, they themselves are going to take it back. They themselves, as the company, are going to refurbish it, repair it, and resell it. And if they cannot do that, if it is not in that condition, they are going to actually recycle themselves. But the challenge is the cost of that particular laptop is going to be higher than what currently the companies are paying. So then again, that L1, L2, L3,
the cost
people
benefit.
are looking at, yes, that becomes a challenge. But in the long run, it makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, they are even adjusting some amount of money for the laptops they are taking back. Anyway, that's how it is. Good. So my last question to you is, what would you tell to the community of practitioners about the survey report? How did you find it? Why should people look at it, and whether it is useful to them?
For me, the survey report is really helpful because I haven't seen as many that do end-to-end understanding of what is the green IT strategy maturity across different markets, across different industries. So it's really comprehensive. It would be interesting to see how it moves over the years. Obviously, we're in a very what's the right word? The trend in what we're doing, it's increasing. There's more and more people working on green IT. There's more and more companies with awareness on it. So I'd love to see those trends as they improve. But yeah, absolutely. For me, it's a comprehensive report where it's a great snapshot. I think it shows that we're at the beginning of this journey, and it shows that awareness is a big driver, and having a report like this does in itself drive more awareness as well.
Sure. Thanks, Fiona, for your time and giving us your insights onto the report. Thank you once again.
Thank you for having me, and look forward to seeing more.